Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first Thought Leadership panel. So we have here today a great panel who will help us learn more about steps we'll be taking regarding health and safety, and as well as instructional solutions as we go into this fall school year. My name is Steve Venz, and I am the Chief Academic Officer and Chief Program Officer for Little Kids Rock. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you the panel here this afternoon. I'll start off with the amazing Mackie Spradley, who is our president of the National Association for Music Education, as well as she's the director of enrichment education for the Texas Education Agency, as well as a professor at University of North Texas. So welcome, Mackie. Glad you could join us. The next person we have here is Bob Morrison. He is the CEO and founder of Quadrant Research. If you haven't heard of the Arts Education Data Project, look it up. It's amazing, and it's done. The power of data has changed many, many lives. So, and thanks to Bob and his organization for driving that effort. So welcome, Bob. And as well, we have two great leaders who are helping us trying to figure out what's going on in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and wind instruments. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you first Mark Speed. He's the president of the College Band Directors National Association, as well as the director of bands at Clemson University. I won't hold that against you, even though I'm from the University of Georgia. Still, I'm glad you're here. And then we have James Weaver, Director of Performing Arts and Sports with the National Federation of State High Schools and Association. Thanks for joining us, James.
Thank you.
This past spring, an international coalition commissioned a study on the effects of COVID-19 in the music rehearsal hall. And James and Mark, you are both the co-chairs for this coalition. So I would love to turn it over to you so you can explain more about the study and what you're discovering from the study.
Sounds good. Well, great. And thank you for having us here today. I'll let Mark kind of introduce the creation of the study here, and we'll look at the PowerPoint up here in just a moment. I do have to say that it's been we've been doing this now, Mark, I counted for 11 weeks.
Wow.
12 weeks. And it has been a whirlwind, crazy 12 weeks.
Yeah. So back on April 25th, as president of the College Band Directors National Association, I had just formed a committee to look into some possible solutions for teaching in the upcoming fall. And I realized, looking through the science, that there was a big gap. We didn't have much about instrumental or even vocal. So I sent an email the Saturday evening, April 25th, to about 16 national organizations. James was on that list, and he pinged me back right away. And Monday morning, we had our first meeting, and we decided to be co-chairs on this process. And later that week, we identified Dr. Shelley Miller at the University of Colorado Boulder as a leading expert in aerosol and indoor mitigation of pathogens. So we contacted her and got the ball rolling. And it really has been a whirlwind. We raised almost $300,000 in a very short period of time and got the two studies underway at a pretty rapid pace. It's going slower than we want it to go, but in terms of science, it's moving at light speed.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we do have these four funders as our major funders. We would not have been able to do this. I want a special shout out to the NAM Foundation, who gave us a $120,000 matching grant, which really gave us a huge leg up on creating that or collecting that $318,000 we're going to need for this study, as well as the NFHS Foundation, the Diodara Foundation, and the College Band Directors National Association. To fill up the rest of what we had to gap, here are the other contributing organizations that we have. We could not do this without having a complete funding mechanism. So even though those first four funders were a majority of our funding sources, these guys really stepped up and made this happen. All right, so we can go to the next slide. With the organizations, we also had the band associations, universities that went into this as well. And so we have a great consortium of funders from athletic conference band associations, and we're very fortunate for them as well. Go to the next slide. And then we have a series of organizations that have not given us funding for it, but have supported us in other non-tangible way or intangible ways, which is going to be invaluable as we can move farther and farther into the study. And so altogether, we have 125 organizations around the planet that have helped us create the coalition on finding out how aerosols work in music education. Go to the next slide. Mark, I'll do this one, and then I'll hand it over to you here.
Okay.
We, like Mark mentioned, Dr. Shelley Miller is our lead researcher. She is brilliant and is incredible on knowing how indoor pollutions, viral and bacterial particles move around air and how to mitigate those out. And then Dr. Jelena Schrebrink, who is from the University of Maryland, is our co-lead researcher, also brilliant. And they are attacking this from two different directions to get valid results. And Mark and I got to sit in on one of their research teams. And I remember just sitting there like, huh, this is great. And then finally, Shelley Miller was like, don't worry, Mark and James, we're recording this for you so you guys can go back and let's do it again and ask any questions you have about translating the science speak, which was good because it was very science speaky. So, so these are our two lead researchers. We can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that everybody understands that we're about 10 or 12 days into this study that's going to last for 6 months. So we're trying to get out the information as quickly as we possibly can. So these results are just very, very in the earliest stages you can imagine. So we'll continue to test in the lab and refine our results. So we're looking at the distribution of respiratory aerosols released while playing wind instruments and brass instruments, singing, acting, speaking, dancing, and even athletic activity, which will translate also to sports, high velocity marching band, etc. We're not dealing with live virus. That would be beyond the scope of most labs in the country. There's only a few places that really are equipped to do that. So we're just looking at the aerosol rates produced by these various activities and trying to figure out how much, where they're headed, and then what we can do to minimize the aerosols going into the room. Mm-hmm. And next slide, please. So we started with the some of the wind instruments that are involved in marching band because marching bands are kind of first up right now. A lot of high schools have already started their summer rehearsals, and certainly college bands are getting ready to gear up soon. And then we're going to keep continuing on with other woodwind instruments for indoors, oboe, bassoon, etc., and as well as vocal, theater, and the athlete. So after the end of July, the study will continue on, and then we don't expect final results until probably end of November, early December. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. You want to take over, James?
Sure. Okay. So we're going to look at a couple data points moving forward, and a couple things we're going to look at is the instruments we use to measure these. So we have the CPC, which is a condensation particle counter, which is looking for particle concentrations of 3 microns or less. Then we're also looking at the aerodynamic particle size or spectrometer, which is acceleration of airborne particles. And this is looking at a 0.5 micron to 20 microns. To put this in relation, what we're looking at is the width of a human hair is 100 microns. And so we're looking at stuff that is invisible to the human eye, and but big enough to carry the virus, as proven already by the WHO and the CDC. So we can go to the next slide. So what we're going to show here is the Schlerin test, and I love saying that word. And at first I hated it because it's hard to say, but I've come to really enjoy it. So what this does, we can go to the next slide. So what this does, you can see here the cloud coming from our researcher's mouth as she's saying the letter A. We've got a couple of videos to kind of show this. But you can see how that airflow then ebbs and flows and eddies around and kind of really creates a cloud that they call a aerosol plume. So we can go to the next slide, and we're going to watch her play the say the alphabet, and really watch for the letter F. That's telling. Oops, I'm sorry, we can't hear the video.
Yeah, there's no audio, Alyssa.
But what you can see here is every time she says a letter, you're able to easily see how much aerosol and heat is coming out. And it's a twofold process there. So while we're figuring out the sound, what you're going to see is two things. You're going to see the vapor and the air flow coming out. And the other thing you're going to see is heat. And how you differentiate the two is the airflow that comes out is all eddied and swirly around. And if you see just heat, it's in those straight lines because of how the heat moves through the air. So there's the difference there.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and so what you saw here is like it doesn't seem as clear as what I normally see. What you see there is you could see how all of it goes. And the hard consonants when we speak, we are seeing bi and sometimes tri-directional airflows coming out of there. So Mark, do you want to describe the clarinet?
Sure. So now we're going to watch the clarinet in front of this instrument, and you'll see that there are plumes coming out the end of the bell, and then she'll move up and you'll be able to see around the keys. Now, again, this instrument measures heat as well. So a lot of what you'll see when she has her hands in front of this mirror is the heat from her hand. So but if you watch carefully, you'll see that the air is coming out of the keys. So you can go ahead and play this one.
You can see here when she's bringing the keys up, you're seeing the aerosol come out of the keyholes. Okay, we can go ahead and stop this video here in the preface of time. So we can go to the next slide. So what you just saw was the bagged instrument. This is a testing tool to see if we're able to capture all of the aerosols in one area. We are not saying right now this is the mitigation strategy to use. This is a experimental testing strategy right now. We're also not saying that we won't recommend this in the future. But for right now, this would be very uncomfortable to play with for any extended periods of time. As Taya, who you see here as a researcher, she said it got very hot and uncomfortable to play in this thing over a long period of time. We can go ahead and play. Next slide. Go to the next slide as well, please. All right, we can go ahead to the next slide. I'm just watching our time clock, and I want to make sure we don't get ourselves too far. Can we go ahead and pause this real quick? Oh, back one more. I want to show this one. So what we're going to see here is she's going to sing. We're going to stop it after a little bit with the mask. But what you're going to see here is she's going to sing a song from Rent. And watch the plume when she sings the word love and how consistent it is and how much it comes out. Also watch the airflow. Even though she's mouth breathing and mouth singing, you'll see a ton of airflow from the nose. We can go ahead and play.
And
425,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, in laughter, strife. How about love?
Now, just see here is a different exercise, but with a mask. And you can see the difference. Okay, we can go ahead and stop the video there. All right, so the next slide. Mark, do you want to go through this one, or do you want me to do this one?
Either way. So this is a trumpet playing into one of the instruments that's capturing the number of particles, the CPC, which is 3 microns or less. And the trumpet player was playing an excerpt that lasted 1 minute, and he had to play it 6 times in a row in order for the instrument to capture everything. So you can see the first spike is, we have over 600 particles per cubic centimeter, and that's a lot. That's a lot of aerosol. And then if you move on to where it says 1561 at the bottom, his bell was covered with a plastic wrap material. So you can see right away that the number of particles was greatly reduced. And then the sit and do nothing is just, he finished playing and allowed the room to evacuate the air with the ventilation system and a HEPA filter. And then he played again with his bell covered and wearing a mask. And so you see right around 2761 there that while he was playing with his bell covered and a mask on, it's barely noticeable how many particles are being released into the room. So that sort of shows us that those two mitigation strategies, wearing a mask with a slit for the mouthpiece and covering the bell with a material, is capturing almost all of the aerosols.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you'll see here at just one point. So you see the first spike there where it says play note in the trumpet. That's that high C. And then right under where it says bell covered with plastic, that's the same high C. And you see that first spike right next to bell covered in mask, that's the same high C. And so we're able to find that in the data. We can go to the next slide. And then this just shows the larger particle. So this is the APS, which is finding larger particles, which we know are more easily transmittable into the system. It's more easily transmittable with a virus. Next slide. Okay, Mark, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So this is the singer who we just saw singing, and she was doing a couple of different things. So you see at the beginning, she was just warming up with scales. Then we had a particular warm up that we had her sing, which you heard a little bit while she had the mask on. And then we have a hymn that she was singing, and then finally the song from Rent. And you can see that there's particles being emitted into the room, over 70 for the hymn and approaching 70 with the Rent song. And then when she sang with the mask, the particles released were almost back to background levels. Mm-hmm. And then she sang with a little device they made out of pantyhose nylon. And then she was just talking, probably with the researchers. And then she just sat for a while, just breathing. So you can see the comparison to singing with and without mitigation. The mitigation of the mask, just simply wearing the mask, has a huge effect on the number of particles being released into the room.
Okay, we go to the next slide. So I'm going to kind of go through these really quick, Mark, if you're okay with that, because I know we're starting to push our time, and Steve, I'm sure, is getting nervous on his end. So what we're going to see here is we're going to look at a couple different examples of what time and airflow do. And so usually I describe these a little bit more in depth, but we'll make sure we kind of go a little quicker through. So we can go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like after 60 minutes with the airflow coming in from the top of the room and exiting the top of the room. And you see here on the scale on the left, the darker blue is a 0 to 10% chance of having a viral infection in this darker blue airstream. And then as the colors go darker, you'll see that the viral quanta continues to increase. So you'll see on the left a shoulder view, and from the right, it's a top end view. So that's after 60 minutes.
Yeah, and that means that if you were standing in one of those colored areas for 60 minutes, that's your chance of being infected by the virus. So if you're standing directly in front of this person's mouth, even just say 2 or 3 feet away, there's almost 100% chance, if that person were infected, that you will also get infected.
Mm-hmm.
And
So this one here, we break down by time. As you can see, at 10, 20, 30, and 60-minute time frames. With this, our research team is really recommending that rehearsal times stay within that 30-minute window. Because you can see here the ambient risk level stays at that 0 to 10% for most of the room. And this, I should say too, this is for an unmasked singer. Okay, next. All right, so this is the same room, but with different ventilations. You see on the top left, all the airflow coming in from outside, and then the bottom right, you see a little strip of blue, and that's where the air is exiting. And you can see here with this kind, there's no actual air mixing at the top like there was with the other room. So if you have a classroom with this kind of a configuration, then what ends up happening is your ambient risk level starts at 30% after an hour. So you can see there's a definite difference here between the other room. We can go to the next one. So this thing here, we also prove exactly the same thing, is that that 30-minute time frame is still ideal. Okay, we can go to the next frame. All right, so here's some general considerations that we'll kind of go through quickly. So Mark, it's up to you.
Sure. So we're recommending that all students wear masks at all times. And there's no talking or playing without masks. When possible, a mask with a small slit for the mouthpiece should be worn, and that should be available to all instruments except for flute. And flute, you can actually place the head joint between the mouth and the mask. If for some reason someone can't wear a mask, they can only play with it and then put the mask on immediately when they're finished playing, even if they're just counting breaths. Next slide, please. So we still are recommending the social distancing that the CDC has by 6 feet around, either a bubble or a square. And that number should also determine the number of students that can be in the room. And so that drastically limits the number of people indoors. They should all sit facing the same direction. And trombones need a little bit more room. We're recommending 9x6 so that their slide in 7th position is not infringing on anyone else's space. And we also recommend no curved rows, because that would concentrate the aerosols to a specific point. We want those aerosols diffused as quickly as possible. And then spit valves only onto something like a puppy pad or some other device that can capture that. And we need to just make sure there's social distancing and cleaning surfaces after touching, etc. Teachers can consider using a portable amplifier. These are available at not too expensive a price point, and that allows you to speak at a lower volume, which will produce less aerosols. And really, the teachers should be wearing a mask at all times. Okay. Okay, so HVAC. You want to take this one, James?
Sure. So with HVAC, we recommend that HEPA filters be added to any existing HVAC system that can handle a HEPA filter. So we really recommend you have a good conversation with your facilities management team to make sure what you can do. There are additional HEPA filter things like Mark had just mentioned, with the ability to add HEPA filtration to your rooms with using a portable unit. And then the other big important thing is air change rates. And so the ACH is an air change rates per hour. And what this means is that if you have a minimum of 3 air change rates per hour times 60 minutes in the room, then you need 60 minutes to let the room clear out again. We can reduce this amount of time between rehearsals if you increase the air change rates per hour. This can be done in newer buildings by having your facilities management increase the airflow, which we recommend as a minimum to make that happen. You can also do by adding additional HEPA filtration to your room. So if you were to get it down to up to like 6, 7, 8 airflows, you can reduce that number down to 30 to 20 minutes between rehearsals. The faster the more they can make the airflow rate change per hours, the faster you can have breaks between the rooms. However, the downside of this is you get more sound, right? Because it's going to be louder. However, if it's a binary choice between having more airflow change rates per hour or not or having additional sound in the room, I'd rather, like Mark said, hear louder pianos and louder fortes than not be able to be in the room. So we can go to the next slide. And then as a final option here, if we do recommend outdoor is the best place to be. It just is going to be safer. And we know right now there's been very limited outdoor mass spreading events because of wind and sun. But we also know that this is a very hot summer all over the country. So if you do need protection from the elements, we do have a tent example here that are no sides, high ceilinged, high pitch. All right, we can go to the next slide. And then this is just a friendly reminder, if you're doing marching band, here's some marching band return guidance, and then also ensure that bell covers are being used as we go. And the CDC distancing guidelines should still be practiced inside and outside. And with that, we will turn it over. And Steve, I apologize, we went as quick as we could, but I did not get it down to the time limit we were supposed to be at.
Oh, you're in such big trouble. Well, thanks, guys. That was really helpful and very informative. And I also want to remind everybody that we're recording these sessions, and we will be sending them out to you as well. So that way, if you weren't able to catch everything and you want to go back through and listen and take more notes, then you can do that. And we'll continue to communicate with both you and Mark, James, you and Mark, and we'll make sure that we continue to send information out to our colleagues. So now, Bob Morrison, what additional thoughts might you have regarding the research, and as well as what ideas or advice would you give folks as we start heading into the fall?
Thanks, Steve. First, I want to say a big thanks to both Mark and James for really playing a leadership role. And I had James on a session earlier this week, and he told me a little bit about the backstory of how this got started. So really thanks to Mark, who had the original idea to and the foresight to see that this was an issue that was going to need to be addressed, and that we needed to get some really smart researchers involved. And thanks to James for being such a great fundraiser, and the support that he's been able to get to help get the info or have the resources necessary to fund, really substantial research around these issues. When we went through this the other day, because the work that we do here, both in my role with Quadrant and also leading Arts Ed New Jersey, we're one of the funders of the coalition. So we were involved in hearing about the results on Monday. And there were some takeaways that we took that we're incorporating into our guidance going out to superintendents across the state of New Jersey, that I think are prudent for everyone to think about as well. The first thing that we're telling everybody, regarding this is that for planning purposes, schools should schedule instrumental music classes, and they should plan for it in a way that takes into account social distancing measures and other health considerations. So don't focus on the research right now, because the information is coming. But first and foremost, plan for if it is okay to play, what are the other considerations that you have to take into account? So plan for it now, and then adapt as the guidance tells us and as the new research will inform us. So by taking that approach, you're staying ahead of the curve and keeping all options open as it relates to both instrumental music and singing. And so the guidance that we're sending out to our superintendents, particularly right now with the information from the preliminary data from the instrumental side of the study, is mask everything. Mask the teachers, mask the students so that they can play, with slits in the masks for the mouthpiece, and mask the instruments. Put the nylon cover over the bells of the horns. This way, they understand that by doing that and then employing proper social distancing based on the size of the room. So every room's going to be different. The bigger the room, the more people you can have. And also paying attention to the ventilation, and also paying attention to the amount of time. So our guidance is that these programs should be conducted for 45 minutes or less. So again, trying to avoid those extended rehearsals or those extended times during the room, which can then populate the room with more aerosols. And we're actually giving similar guidance for singing, that again, plan for singing to be able to take place in the building with proper social distancing, limited time, proper hygiene within the room, and optimizing the HVAC system for increased air change rates. We think that these measures, particularly with the early indications that we're seeing from the study, show promise. And we're telling our superintendents that the research is promising, but more information is needed. And we're going to have that information in about 2 weeks. So for now, plan to have the programs. And then the additional information will let us know how we may have to adapt that plan, as opposed to just throwing up your hands and saying, oh, we can't do that now. That's not the case. And the rumblings and the rumors out there that are saying that we're not going to be able to sing and that we're not going to be able to play instruments, I think that is, way ahead of where the research currently is, because we can play our instruments safely with proper mitigation strategies in place. And we're probably going to be able to do the same thing with vocal, with singing, but we'll know more about that in 2 more weeks where more definitive statements can be made. So I think it's important to really get this information in front of your decision makers to let them know, let's plan for it and then adapt, plan and adapt. And that's really the best strategy to use, because by taking that approach, you leave all your options open until information comes forward that will allow you to refine your approach properly. The other thing that I wanted to share with you briefly in thinking about planning for the fall, and I think this is coming from our report, September Ready Fall 2020 Guidance for Arts Education here in the state of New Jersey. And I will drop a link into the chat for everyone when I'm done here, so you can grab the document. A couple key principles we put forward to all of our leaders across the state. And this was done by a task force of over 120 people. It included all of our education associations, from our State Teachers Association to the Principals Association to the Superintendents Association, the School Boards Association, as well as all of our arts organizations and music organizations, all contributing their best thinking into the guidance. And the key principles, I think, are really important and I think valuable for anyone to utilize. And the first is sequential arts learning must continue for all students in all instructional models. We've just done a 4-month pilot program of doing remote learning, and we've learned a lot in that process. We can learn from that and bring forward things that will work as we come back into school in the fall, regardless of what that may look like, whether it's in person with restrictions, whether it's a hybrid model, or whether it is fully remote. But sequential arts learning must continue for all students in all instructional models. Many people have heard me say often, it's change the how, not the what. Now's not the time to rethink how we're going to deliver instruction. Now's not the time to change what we are delivering. Now is the time to think about how we are delivering that instruction. But the instruction should not in and of itself change. The second thing is that proper staffing and support must be provided to allow continuity of instruction based on health and safety requirements. So health and safety comes first. But then we need to have the personnel in place to provide continuity of instruction. So that is where having our arts faculty staff being available and in place is really critical. The third thing is arts educators and administrators must be included in the district planning. So I know many plans are underway. School districts are weeks away from opening, but if you have the opportunity to get on your planning team, do it. If you're not, asked to be on it, and also see if somebody representing the arts is available, so that your voice is there to help guide them with all the best information that's coming out. And then the fourth one is really, really important, that schools must prioritize the making and creating of the arts together. The one thing we learned a lot about what we can do remotely. The one thing we can't do remotely is play together. And that's the one thing our students miss the most. So if we're in a hybrid model, focus on when we're together, we create music. When we're together, we create works of art. And then focus on those things that we can do remotely. Don't waste precious time being together on things that you can do remotely. You have to prioritize making music when the students come together, because that's what they miss the most. The fifth thing is that social emotional learning needs of students, faculty, and staff must be addressed in all aspects of instruction. So this is where we talk about the need to embed social emotional learning into music education, into arts education, and do it in an intentional way. And I'll drop another link into the chat that'll give you a resource that you can use that provides the intersections between the social emotional learning competencies and the artistic processes, which will help you understand how to embed SEL into your own curriculum. The sixth thing is that professional development must be provided. We want to have professional development for our teachers who are having to use new instructional models, new technology, new tools in order to manage and run their classrooms effectively. They can't do it if we're not supporting them with proper professional development. So we need to make sure that that's provided to them as well. And the last one is that our cultural community resources should be utilized for instructional support. Many of our schools utilize our cultural partners for in-school assembly programs, for field trips, for teaching artist programs, for multi-year partnerships. And these can still be utilized, but they'll need to be utilized in a different way. They can be done remotely. They can be done in other ways that still will augment what's happening in the classroom, but also help support the work of our cultural organizations who have also been incredibly hard hit by this pandemic. So I think it's important that you take those 7 principles to heart and try to embed them and work with them within your own districts and your own schools. Utilize the information and resource that's coming out from the COVID Coalition, as well as the information that's coming out from Little Kids Rock and the great tools that they're providing to allow creative ways to make music in this new environment, and also look for the guidance that has come out from the National Association for Music Education, which will give you information to help make important decisions to successfully run your program. So, with that, I'll toss it back to you, Steve, so we can actually hear from our sitting president.
Fantastic. All right, Bob, thank you. Just 3 things to reiterate before I pass it along to Mackie was that your point about the 2-pronged approach, which is go in to speak to your administrators, be involved in the planning process, and most importantly, bring the research and bring the solutions. Because being on the other side of the fence as an administrator, you don't want to hear people complaining. You want to hear solutions, particularly at this time. So the second one is the SEL component. If you're doing social emotional learning and addressing some of the competencies, make sure that you stay connected with 3 folks: the parents of the kids. You want to make sure you're in strong communication with them, that you're going to be folding in some of the SEL competencies. The second one, make sure that you're telling your administration so they know what you're specifically doing with that. And then the third one is make sure you're connected with whether it's the school psychologist or the counselor or whoever's overseeing that process as kids are returning to school. Last thought with Bob, your thing, talking about working with outside organizations. The one thing I would recommend, people are not thinking about this, but if you are going back to your school district, stay in touch with risk management, because they will be the ones determining if you're going to be going outside of the school when eventually the virus subsides or whatever happens. But if you're thinking of doing any traveling by yourself for PD or doing it with kids, first check with risk management with your school district. So, all right, Mackie, what have you been hearing out there? What things can you help us out with?
Oh, my plate is just flowing over with so many things I've been hearing from the field. First, I want to say thank you to all of the presenters before me, Bob and oh, I forgot, James and Mr. Speed. Thank you so much for all that you have done to contribute to this call. I want to start first at this place. As I was listening to each of you talk, I think because of my experience in working in a large urban school, I thought immediately about school facilities and just wanted to have us think a little bit about what that might look like across the United States, because every school will not have the capacity to change the to address the HVAC, or will not have the space to actually. I actually know teachers that teach their choirs in a small classroom, some in closets. So I think what I'm really saying is, one of the things that we really want to make sure of is that all students have an opportunity to continue to engage in music making. And when it comes to going back to school, if that is where we're supposed to go, I guess my greatest concern would be for those teachers that don't have the advantages or ways to make sure that they are safe or their students are safe. So I think it also mirrors what we see across the board as we are dealing with the COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on the states, that certain groups, Black and brown people, have are more susceptible and are at a disadvantage for multiple reasons. That element is also going to be true when it comes to schooling and ensuring that our students have sequential learning in music, that continues. So I think what I really want to encourage teachers to do, all of the things that have been said before, but also really think about what you have in your particular district. What do you have that you have access to? So is it something where if you can't do face-to-face in your school, but maybe it can be in another space or another space in the school? And so it's not that we want to change, as Bob said, it's not that we want to change what we have been doing, but we are really going to have to think about how we make those things happen. And it may not necessarily be in the space that you've used before. And just wanting to make sure that every student, as we've said before, every student has the opportunity to continue to be in the music program. Secondly, I have, from the field, I have heard over and over about the angst and the anxiety that teachers are experiencing. They're afraid for their jobs, they're afraid for their safety, they're afraid for multiple things. So I think that this is a critical time as a music education profession that we think of each other and that we try to network with each other and to continue to remember that we are not an island, and that we can partner with others, that those professional development opportunities that we have, sometimes they're not necessarily a webinar. Maybe it's 2 or 3 people that you know, and you get on a Zoom call and you talk about what you're doing and what you've been able to do, or just some brainstorming. And also it helps with just social and emotional support. You know, I always feel better if I get to cry on someone else's shoulder, you know, and wet their shoulder, you know, because and if they're in the room with me, I don't feel so silly. I know that there's somebody else with me. And so that, I think that is critical as we listen to teachers talk and become very, very fearful. Their well-being, their emotional well-being, their mental health, all of that is critical. And ensuring that teachers are taking good care of themselves so that they can pour out to students. And then I think the other thing I want to, I guess, piggyback on is that, you know, we all love music and we love making music. You know, I still sing at home, and the best place for me to sing is down my stairwell. I feel sorry for my neighbor, but I mean, my voice is just profound. But we like to sing with other people. And that is, you feel the vibration all on your body. It makes your hair rise up. And that is the excitement of performance, of group performance. It's like nothing else. But I also want us to keep in mind that what we're doing as musicians, as teachers, and as administrators, that we can still, regardless, if we end up, who knows what our fall will look like. If we end up performing virtually, those can still be phenomenal experiences. You may not feel all of the vibrations that you would feel in a live performance, but you will feel the spirit of what you're doing as a group. And so I want to encourage all teachers, all administrators, everyone who is involved in the research, and we're looking forward to learning more, and know that things are going to change every single day. But as we continue to go on our journey together, to keep lifting each other up, thinking about each other, supporting each other, helping each other learn more, helping each other cope, and just listening. Sometimes just being a good listener is a perfect way to help us. There's so many great resources out there. Bob has talked about his work that he's doing. James and Mr. Speed have, I just love the last name, I'm sorry, have talked about the great work that they're doing. So I encourage you to keep reaching out for places where you can get more expertise in what you're going to continue to do. And remember, there is always going to be someone thinking about you, because I will be one of them that is thinking about you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mackie. I like the good vibrations. We're all looking forward to that coming together. So I would love to open this time right now for some questions that our audience might have for the panelists. If you want to just type it into the chat room, when they pop up, I will, we can read them out. Survey says, as I'm waiting. So,
and Steve, we've been answering a lot of them in the chat as the presentation's been going.
Oh, okay. See, I had everything hooked up until I got to the chat room here, so everything was set. Okay. So,
well, while you're waiting on that, I'd like to just comment on one of the things that that Mackie was addressing about the need for us to support each other and work together, which I completely agree. But the one thing that was clear to me this spring is the way that our profession came together. Our music educators were helping each other. They were setting up Facebook groups where they could exchange ideas and information, and everyone was generous with their ideas. They were generous with their time. They were just the way that, teacher helping teacher was so inspiring. And again, I think that also with the coalition that James and Mark have been able to pull together is probably the most significant unification of the music education community that we've seen in our history. So I think that this is a moment for us to continue to work together, to support each other, to hold each other up, but know that we're going to need to do that over the long term. So the habits that we're practicing right now are the habits that we need to keep practicing as this moves forward.
Thanks, Bob. We do have some questions now. So here's one question for the team. Wasn't super clear when asked about younger age group. Is the study looking at children, within primary grades of like kinder, third grade,
Yeah, so we had to be very selective on the age groups we picked. So we also have to be picky on, there's a couple things with FERPA laws and other research laws that exist on testing super minor children. And so we ended up with our research team compromising on grades 3 through 5 for the elementary levels. For one reason is they can do all of the exercises with limited amount of direction. So that's part of it. Because in a research lab, every minute that we're in that lab costs a lot of money. And so we have to be very picky on that. And we would hate to have a kindergartner in there who we can't get them to do the experiment repeatedly. And all of a sudden we've wasted a research day because we can't get the experiment to work. And so I know those of you who are elementary and lower level elementary teachers, we apologize, but we had to make the administrative decision for that. We also had to make the same decision on not testing adult singers as well, because we wanted to focus on our music education classrooms. And so we had a lot of pressure from some other groups to get adults over 60 to be in the lab to do singing. And we may get to that point, but every time we add multiple groupings, because we can't just test the little ones, we got to test male, female, and as many different diversity aspects as we can. And every time we do that, that cost jumps by tens of thousands of dollars. So we had to try to find a balance between the cost and the results. And so we think we've got a good balance. We just need to be able to see if we can expand that later on. But right now, we think we've got the balance that we're able to afford.
Okay, thank you. We have another question about the pacing of all the findings. Like, what's the schedule? Like, what are the other sub parts of the research that you'll be releasing, like the theater, singing, and so on? What's the schedule for releasing that information?
Okay, Mark.
I'd love to be able to tell you a great answer, but we're going to get our next report out by the end of July. And, the study is due to wrap up end of November, early December. So it's a long study, and they're going to be looking at lots of data as we go. If we, perhaps if we find that we have important information to share as we get into September and October, we may go ahead and file a report. But to answer your question, end of July, and then wrap up in early December.
And with information coming in the meantime.
Right.
That's when the peer review aspect comes into play. This is real science, so it's going to be, a real science paper and peer reviewed.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And as soon as we get the information, we will also distribute it among our network of teachers and administrators as well. So I saw that question come in. Another one for you. Have you had any, did you put any news releases together or statements for those who are going to be going to talk to policymakers? So if I'm going to go speak to, the head of education for the governor's office, or how about talking to a superintendent or school board, are you putting together bullets?
Yep. So what we have is we'll be releasing a press release, I think, by the end of the week. We're working on that now with our research team and going back and forth between Mark and myself to get the languages all right. And then the NFHS publications department will be sending that out. We have a list of hundreds of thousands of news media outlets that stuff gets sent to. And then Mark has put together a one-pager that's kind of an easy to digest. Here's what the recommendations are, and here's where the science is leading us. And as we're actually on this webinar, the emails have been going back and forth between me, Mark, our research team. And so that one-pager is being developed in real time. We hope to have that out on the website as well by the end of the week. So even though it's not fast enough for the community, we are moving as fast as humanly possible, and we'll continue to do so. So kind of keep an eye on that website that we have everything on for the aerosol study stuff, because that's where you'll see the latest and greatest information. And then just as a highlight, in the last 48 hours since we released, actually hasn't even been 48 hours, we've had over 70,000 people go and download the first report we gave on Monday. And so it's definitely getting out there.
Fantastic.
And can I add to that,
yeah,
Mark or Steve?
Please. Yeah.
So we actually, as I mentioned, we've taken the guidance recommendations that are in the PDF document itself and extracted those to put into a letter going out to all of our superintendents here in the state, and the documents will be delivered to all of our associations and our Commissioner of Education, just so that we can be, again, proactive with them regarding decisions that are being made now. And then as more information comes out, we will be pushing that out. But I think that it's really important to move this information out to your communities as quickly as possible, because these decisions are being made right now.
100% agree.
Yeah, I think that's, everyone's grappling with this. So research, any type of research is going to be really crucial at this time. So it's fantastic. So we have about a minute left. I'm going to just go around one more time. Any last thoughts for the panel? Let's go back to James. Yeah, any last thoughts for everyone?
I say this all the time. We have professional problem solvers in our music area, and so I just want you guys to keep doing the professional problem solving. We are here to help as much as possible from the back end at the national level. I know myself, Mark, Bob, and Mackie are all working nonstop to try to make sure that music education continues in our country. One of the phrases, and I know I get in trouble for this a lot, but one of the phrases that drives me nuts is music is more important now than ever. I will say music is important today. It was wildly important yesterday, and it's going to be incredibly important tomorrow. And so I want to ensure that what we're doing is keeping music at the forefront and engaged with our students, and anything we can do to help do that, I am 100% putting my efforts behind it. And I can almost speak for Mackie and Bob and Mark that their efforts are 100% behind that one as well. And so that's kind of my last takeaway.
Fantastic. Great. Music is so important during this time, right? And making music.
Exactly.
Mark.
Well, James put it so well. And as we began this effort, I kept using the phrase as we were meeting with various folks online to raise money. I said, it's nothing less than the future of music at stake right now. We need to solve these problems, and there's no more important endeavor in all of our lives right now than saving music and getting back to making it together in the same room.
Exactly. And Bob?
Yeah, I think that the one thing to keep in mind, and I just came off another session earlier talking about social emotional learning with a group of composers, a lot of the folks that are working on all of the adaptable arrangements. And one of the things that has struck me is that as challenging as this is right now, and there's a lot of unknowns, and there's rightfully a great deal of anxiety, there's also a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to reimagine how we can utilize the tools that are available to us to meet the needs of our students in new and different and unique ways. Remember, artistic processes from the standards talk about creating, performing, responding, and connecting. Now's a great opportunity to spend time on creating and responding and connecting while creating new ways and new innovations on how we perform together. So this is a great opportunity of innovation, and I personally believe that we are on the precipice of a new renaissance for music and arts education in this country.
Yeah, I hear you. Exactly. Mackie.
Well,
last word.
Everyone else has just been so phenomenal. I guess the only thing that I can say is I believe music is the vehicle that brings healing and hope to us individually, as a group, as a country, and as the world. And regardless to whether we are in the classroom or if we're virtually or if we are playing on the rooftop or singing on top of a mountain, I know it does matter, but it doesn't matter, because music is going to be the healing for all of us. And I know it seems a little bit mushy, and but I truly believe that. I truly believe that when we sing, when we play, when we beat a drum, all of those things bring healing to us. And as long as we have the opportunity to do it, wherever it may be, that there is going to be continued help and hope for us.
I just have to say amen to that. Really. So with that final word, I just want to let everybody know tomorrow we'll have our second panel at 2:30. And like Bob was saying, it's actually regarding advocacy, but it's not going to be your typical advocacy panel because, of course, this is not our typical summer leading into a typical school year. So please tune into that. That will be at 2:30, I believe, Eastern time. And then we also have another panel that will be talking about specifically social justice and addressing issues regarding that within music education. And that will be at 5 p.m. tomorrow at Eastern time as well. So thank you, everyone who joined the panel. Mackie, Bob, Mark, and James, thanks everyone for joining us and really giving us great insight and being really helpful with this and bringing such passion and commitment to this. So, and we look forward to staying in touch with everyone, and hopefully I'll see everyone tomorrow. All right, take care and thank you. Have a good night.